do they just completely ignore the facts of the body, the way that the body affects the behavior?
Yeah, they don't believe in brain development.
Oh, what? Okay.
So, and that comes from the belief that the thetan is what is animating the body, not the brain. They believe the thetan is what is seeing, not the eyeballs. And L. Ron Hubbard does at some places describe the brain as sort of a switchboard. He sort of dips his toe into this pool without swimming around in it, of like just how limited should a physical body be if it loses brain function? Should a thetan be able to completely animate a body if it has decreased brain function? And a Scientologist would say, well, if the thetan was in good shape, yes, it could. The brain doesn't operate the body, the thetan does.
Wow.
A Scientologist would say a thetan that's in really good shape could see even if the optic nerve was severed. Now, that's why I say they dip their toe in this pool, but they don't swim in it. Because you're like, well, then why aren't Scientologists able to see when they're having problems with their eyes? Like, so they have this belief that is kind of completely divorced from anything in the real world experience.
Yeah.
But they 100% don't believe in this idea that your brain is fully formed. Your brain isn't fully formed until, I've heard, like 23, 24 years old. A Scientologist would say that is psych propaganda designed to control the population. Scientologists wouldn't believe that for a second.
Okay, well, that makes a lot more sense in your stories. How did this translate for you as a child, having this mindset and being treated as an adult? Because I think you mentioned in your story with Leah that you lived in your own apartment. How old were you when you had to live separate from your mom?
I'm 13 years old.
Okay.
Was the last time I ever actually had a parent in my life as a parental figure the way you would normally think about it. So we were here in Clearwater, Florida. All of the Scientology staff members that were studying and training and working here at the time all lived in just basically a giant apartment complex here in Clearwater, Florida. It's still there, and that's still what it's used for. And so, but these apartment complexes are separated by gender. And so we were in a 3-bedroom apartment, and each bedroom had 3 people in it, and then there was 2 extra beds in the living room.
What?
And I mean, it was sort of like maybe you want to compare it to boarding school. Like you go off to a dorm in a boarding school. Except you didn't spend any time there. You just slept there. Like you weren't, it's not like you're hanging out there. You just sleep there. And so, and of course, my mom was in, a dorm for women. And we were all on the same schedule. So we were all working or studying from, 8 in the morning to 10, 11 o'clock at night. So I would see my mom at meal breaks, and I would maybe see her at the end of the day. But I'm gonna say something and then I'll walk it back. She wasn't playing the role of mom anymore. Mm-hmm. I mean, she was sort of overseeing us to the degree that she could, but that was no longer her role because we were now doing the exact same thing in life, essentially.
Oh.
She wasn't really making more money than we were making. We're just all making about $20-$30 a week. So, she was no longer, quote unquote, taking care of us. She might have been there to make sure we were doing okay, but she was no longer taking care of us, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
She was no longer providing for us. How about that? She was no longer providing for us as a parent.
Yeah. How did that make you feel? Were you okay with that? Were you like, yeah, this is the mission. I'm an adult. Were you empowered by that?
At the time, absolutely. And this is something that I think makes a really interesting conversation point because as a kid, now remember, I didn't grow up and I didn't have a normal childhood.
Yeah.
So sometimes these questions are a little rhetorical. Like, as a kid, what might be your biggest gripe? That you're treated like a kid, you don't have rights, you can't do what you want, you got to listen to your parents. Like, where does all that teen angst come from? Having to live under someone else's roof by someone else's rules, and you want to be your own person and everything. And I think this sort of gets to the subject of brain development. Like, as a child, you think you are so much more developed than you are. And that was certainly true for me. So from those ages, that experience that I had from about the age of 13 to 15 and 16, I look back on that period of my life quite fondly, to be honest. So not only did I have a lot of rights and freedoms and privileges and, you know, self-determination to the degree that you can have that working within Scientology, but there was like 200 other kids there my age from all around the world doing the same thing I was doing.
Whoa.
And so when I say it was a positive experience, I would say the vast majority of what I'm even referring to is the social experience.
Okay.
You could be digging ditches, and if you're doing it with your friends, you're probably having a good time.
Okay.
And that's something that I probably have not been clear enough about in the past telling my story, or at least even thinking about it to myself, is how much of my positive thoughts about that time was just due to having fun with people my own age, even if what we were doing was kind of bullshit.
Yeah, but I mean, it makes total sense because you're making the best out of the situation. And like you said, you are a child who has this inflated sense of power and confidence, and you're changing the world, and you're on a mission, and you have all these kids around you. It would kind of be similar to EFY, which is called Especially for Youth. I think they just changed the name of it in Mormonism. But basically, people come from all over the world, just the youth, and it's like this weekend long thing. You pay a bunch of money and you go and you do all these activities, and you're like changing the world as Mormons. So I'm assuming it would be like that, but 24/7. So of course you're going to make the most of it, and that's your life, and you don't know any different. So I think it's great that you were able to form a positive experience from that. And I think what I'm wondering is you had such a positive experience as a teenager when naturally you would want your own independence and you don't want to follow anyone else's rules like a parental figure. But how did you feel when you were little? Like that must have felt really frustrating having an adult try and treat you like an adult when you don't really know any better. You don't know what's going on.
Yeah. I mean, it was frustrating. What can make it hard for me to do a great job answering the question is I don't have anything to compare it to.
Right.
But, you know, like as a child, there are certain, now that I have children of my own,
right.
You know, I have 3 daughters, 16, 14, and 12 now. And, you know, my youngest daughter is now as old as I was when I started working full-time for Scientology. I couldn't even fathom having my daughter do that.
Yeah.
My oldest daughter is the age that I was, is actually older than the age that I was when I finished my Scientology training in Clearwater and went back to Philadelphia by myself without my mother at the age of 15 to work for Scientology for 100 hours a week, downtown Center City, Philadelphia.
Whoa.
8:30 in the morning to 10:30 at night, commuting by myself by bus from downtown Philly to South Jersey.
Just got the chills.
I don't let my 16-year-old walk around the park by herself.
Yeah.
And this is why sometimes when I tell my story, I have to make it clear that I feel like I personally kind of walked through fire without getting burned in many ways. Like I went through this very potentially horribly abusive situation and managed to get abused as little as possible. And sometimes it can make it challenging to tell my story because it's like, is it, I have to listen to it and go, does this really sound like a cautionary tale, or does this sound like you had a great childhood?
Sure.
Sometimes the way that I tell my story, especially because I'm kind of a positive person, it can sound like I'm saying, well, it really wasn't that bad.
Right.
When what I'm really trying to say is, for most people, the potential for abuse here is astounding.